Well, welcome to WebTide for September. We are delighted this go around to have David. And David, I don't think I've ever nailed how to pronounce your last name. So save me.
Marconnet.
Marconnet, thank you very much. We're delighted to have David Marconnet, and I guess we'll just go ahead and jump right into our content here. This WebTide will be a little bit of a different format than we typically have. Usually, we just sort of turn the reins over to whoever the presenter is. This presentation will be a little bit of a dialogue going back and forth. David and I have had a number of really cool conversations in the lead up to our meetup today. And so we're going to cover a bunch of really cool topics. And so, David, would you like to actually sort of kick off by talking a little bit about your day job and your personal background? So you said that Bama Tracker obviously isn't your day job. So what was the sort of beginning motivation behind deciding to put together a site that sort of helped tell the data story of what was going on with COVID?
So, early on, I think we had just maybe a case or two confirmed in the state. The health department through ArcGIS. And I have a screenshot of their original one somewhere, but I saw it and I started looking at their data. And at the time, it looked like maybe they were just going to show sort of here's total cases and total tests and just kind of keep it real simple. So I started digging into their board and I found that I could kind of collect their data in a periodic way. So one weekend I was just messing around and I started kind of grabbing the data every hour. It didn't change every hour, so that ended up being kind of a waste of time. But I started building this thing to where I had the data every day. And eventually I was like, hey, I can make a chart out of this. It took 4 or 5 days of data. So I went and I built it and I put it under my personal domain first. I shared it with a few people and they said, hey, that's pretty cool. Can you do some more? So a little bit more. And then I bought a different domain and threw the site online, posted it on Reddit, like in Huntsville and Alabama and Birmingham Reddits. And a lot of people were like, hey, this is cool. Keep growing it out, keep doing more and more. And so from the middle of March into April, late April, it just started snowballing into this bigger project that everybody seemed to find a lot of use in. And then what happened was the original domain got blacklisted by a security company in like, I don't know where they are, but they issued like a block on it. They called it malware and all this other stuff. And so I had to quickly change to a different domain name. And all I can think of the reason they blocked it was because it had COVID in the URL. And I think they were just doing like this massive block of all these domains because they thought they were spam. So I went and looked and I on the registry I use, I searched for a whole bunch of different names and I finally came across bamatracker.com being available, which seemed like just luck to me, and bought it, flipped it all over, and then been working on it ever since. But it was supposed to just be a fairly simple thing that sort of kind of ballooned into a larger scale operation ever since then.
So in terms of the hosting picture and the data center picture, what do things sort of look like behind the scenes in terms of how Bama Tracker is constructed?
So it's pretty simple, which has sort of been the core of the site. I'm trying to keep everything simple, but I've got a single virtual machine that is just a typical LAMP style web server. I've got Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. I originally started building some stuff in .NET and actually using Power BI. And from a personal standpoint, the hosting costs were more than I wanted to spend to try to build it that way. So I ended up falling back to what was cheaper. So I've got a single server that's just got MySQL. Most of the front end is JavaScript and HTML, and so there's a little bit of processing done with PHP, but that's pretty much all I use it for. And I happen to be a big fan of MySQL. I know some people don't like it, and some people prefer things like SQL Server. But again, it's a cost thing for me. So I built the database in MySQL, and it's also very simple. And I mean, like, all the data is, I could look, but I think the data itself is no more than a couple megs of actual disk space. So it's sitting out there running on a single server. I've got daily backups. They go offsite. I've got Cloudflare. I don't know if you used that before, but I run all my DNS through Cloudflare to protect from denial of service, and it actually blocks your public IP from being visible as well. And I have some history with web attacks where I've been the victim of them. So I found Cloudflare a few years ago, and just kind of swear by them to this point. And they're a free service too. So what else? There's and I can get into some of the code if we want to see it, but the charts are all done now with a library called Apex Charts, which is just a JavaScript built charting library. It's also free to use. And originally I was using a different library called Chartist, and they were okay, but I quickly got into some corners with them. So I had to sort of start over about halfway through and redo every chart with Apex. But no regrets there, because Apex has a lot more capability with exporting, and you can download the raw data behind each chart directly from the tool. Better support on mobile, excuse me, and just a better overall library.
Yeah, you actually you actually looked forward to one of my into one of my questions, because I was curious about the frameworks you decided to use and if there had been any switching out of different solutions. So it sounds like yes.
Yeah, there were. And another thing I changed up too was I don't know if you've ever heard of skeleton CSS, but that's actually a very lightweight HTML framework that I started with, and it's literally a very much a skeleton type, like boilerplate type thing for a website, and it's responsive, and it was able to build a lot of stuff just by using it and not get too fancy. So, you know, skeleton CSS is one thing. Apex Charts. I do use jQuery some. You know, the rest of it's just nothing too fancy. Just HTML, and that's about it.
So in terms of the user interface and the types of data that you decide to focus on, how do you make decisions about what gets represented? Do you have a sort of, do you engage with people on social media and get feedback? Do you have people that you sort of trust to give you advice?
That's a good question. So pretty early on, I started getting some people that were interested through Reddit and on Twitter. In fact, I didn't even have the Twitter until maybe it was May when I created the Twitter account. But regardless, a number of professionals, especially out of UAB, doctors and other types that were involved in the field, got in touch with me and kind of asked me specifics about, hey, if you have this data, could you compute this value and kind of present it in a chart for me? And if you want, I can share my screen at some point. But
oh, by all means, feel free to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that may be more interesting than me just trying to talk through it all. But let me do that. Okay. Yeah. So let me know if that fits. Okay. I can go a little smaller or whatever you want to get it on the screen. Does that look okay?
I can't see it, but I'm not sure if that's because I'm doing the recording.
It would help if I actually told.
No, I can't see it either.
There we go. How about that?
There we go.
Hey, I got to click the right button to get this to work. Okay. Okay. So a lot of professionals in the medical field were very interested in the % positive type data. So I ended up getting a lot of people driving me towards, coming up with various ways to show the % positive. So this is the kind of data that's come through people getting in touch with me that said, hey, if you've got, cases and the amount tested, can you come up with these values? So, and it got complicated as time went by. But so this is an example. We've got this % positive. This is actually per day. And what this means is this takes the change in the cumulative tests and the change in the cumulative cases and it's, then it's cases divided by tests per day. And what you end up seeing is these really weird spikes because the health department would actually be delayed in updating their test count. And so you might have like, 500 cases added to the count, but in the same day, you might have only 800 tests added to the count. So, your 500 divided by 800 is really high, which is, way different than we ever see in the real world. And so this grew from this chart, which is sort of not the best data in the world, to tracking more of a 7-day average. So I can come up with the 7-day change in cases and the 7-day change in tests, and then divide those two over time. And you end up with a percent positive chart that's much more like this, where we can see after we issued the stay at home that our percent positive just plummeted. And we can see that it started to come back up a little bit before the restrictions loosened. And then after Memorial Day, it just kept going up. After the 4th, it kept going up. And again, we had this mask ordinance. And then we saw a pretty strong drop after that. And again, we're seeing ourselves kind of go back up with in-person school starting. What you're running into with this now is there's a second data set based off what the health department's called probable cases. And that's caused a lot of confusion. And there's a lot of debate over what a probable case even really means. And so the site is trying to track things kind of both ways now, which is why you have this second line. So if I turn off just regular positive, this is our percent positive with the probables included. So at one point we were much higher than we really want to be, and we're still a good bit higher. But all of this was driven pretty much by some UAB doctors. They asked me about doing the range here, which is based off some Johns Hopkins data that they sent me. A lot of them like to look into the mortality data, which is another thing that was driven by feedback. And there's just an absolute ton on the site now. It ballooned from being a fairly simple site to there being a lot of really deep charts. And I went to the wrong thing, sorry. Yeah, so this came about from another doctor who got in touch with me and said, well, I'd like to see the case fatality per county. So this takes your actual confirmed cases divided by your actual deaths divided by cases to give you the case fatality rate. And then I expanded that by taking the population into account. So you can say, what are your deaths per 10,000 population? And if you sort this, you can quickly see that, we've had a lot of deaths take place in counties like this that have a pretty low population overall. And that helps, I think, a lot of these professionals to look into why are we seeing so much, why is this happening in like Lowndes County, for example. And then the site continues to let you keep drilling in, and you can look at, well, this is Lowndes County, and this is all of its current numbers, and we've got cumulatives over time and changes over time. And you haven't actually asked me this question yet, but you can see some oddities here where we have this cumulative chart, and a cumulative chart's never supposed to go down, but yet it went down, and it went down a lot, and then slowly started ticking back up. That's actually one of the many issues that I have to deal with when it comes to the data coming from the health department. This one I can actually explain, but there's other cases where something will drop and it's not really explained. And I try to mark them when I can see them, but I also just don't know half the time what they were doing.
So what does that plumbing look like? How do you get access to the information from the Department of Health and other agencies?
That's a great question. So I'll show you two things if I can see. Okay, so first of all, I've got a little dashboard here that I use to track. So this is actually all their data live from their board, these big numbers. And then in parentheses, I've got my count next to it. And so when they're green, then I know that I'm matched up to what they're showing. And when they're not green, then I have to run different collectors, which a lot of this stuff is actually automated. But the way it works is you got their dashboard, which I'm assuming everybody here has probably looked at their board. It has changed quite a bit over time, and I'll show you some interesting things about it that are hard to work with. But this is an ArcGIS, whatever you want to call it, dashboard. It's pretty heavy. So if I turn off the cache and run this thing the first time, and I'm on a fast computer, I'm on a Core i7 with 16 gigs of RAM, and I mean, it's like super fast, and the whole board just absolutely crawls on my computer. You can see right now it's not even coming up, so hold on one second. Maybe I should hit it again. What I want to do is I want to load this, and I'll let you see all of the network calls that it makes, and you'll be able to see what I'm hitting to actually get the data that Bama Tracker collects every day. But right now their board is not playing nice with me, so hang on.
So it sounds like you've had to put together some of your own secret sauce here, because I'm guessing there's not an API.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing public that what they've done is they've exposed some JSON endpoints, but they are not, they're not documented, and they're actually pretty messy. And so I actually got to load a new tab. I don't know why that first tab is dead, but you see here it's loading. Same board, and we've loaded 17 megs so far, which is quite a bit of data if you're familiar with that. What happens is you've got all these calls. So there was 137 requests made, and let me make this a little bigger so we can actually see it. And there's a bunch in here that are, oops, I hit the wrong thing. If I filter them down to query, which I only got one. Let me try to refresh this one more time. There we go. You see all those ones that say query? And there's a bunch of them. This time we've gotten more like 500 requests coming back. Yeah, 13 seconds, about 27 megs of data. But you have all these ones I filtered to their queries, and you can see this is where they actually get their. This is where the board is querying a data set on the ArcGIS side, and I don't have any good data in these. Let me see if I can find one that does. These are all pretty ugly. But what I had to do, and I have to do this all the time, is I have to go through these queries. Here we go. Here's the first real one. So you can see query, and it's this big old long nasty string, query string. But you can see that it's returned this value 82,057. If you go here and look, that's tested diagnostic testing. So that's our 14-day test count. So that's one of them. And then what you'll find is sometimes they have the same query more than once. And sometimes they have an old version of the query running that returns data from a month ago, and you don't want to use that one. So I have to check on these. I mean, I check them almost every week to make sure they haven't changed on me, because this is the only endpoint that I can hit from Bama Tracker's world. And then I have a couple pretty massive data collector scripts that run every hour, and they hit these queries, and they can see, okay, this 8879, which is our cases in the last 14 days, that's different than what I have in the database for today in history. So I'm okay to update the value. But there's other checks that have to happen too. So let me just go through a few more of these. You can get, like, here's a big one. This one has a lot of data in it. This one's got this is our counties. It's the increase in cases over time. So if you go look for one of their tabs, that ends up driving probably this chart. And there's just a whole lot of stuff in here that I had to just dig through over time. So there's 81 of these right now. And it gets even more complicated because I'm tracking everything down to the county level. So let me show you what happens when you do this. If you clear all these out, and then you pick a county, let's go pick Tuscaloosa. You see all these new calls that just ran. 11 of them are queries. What this has done on their board is it's filtered the data down to Tuscaloosa County. So I've got our confirmed cases in the county, probable cases in the county, again, confirmed and probable deaths, and et cetera. All these things change, except where they list statewide, obviously that's not going to change. But if I pick a different county and then go back to it, you'll see it. You'll see these values change. So I've got another service that monitors these per county. And I just go in here and I figured out which queries were which values. So I went too far down. Let's see. 107. I don't know which one that is. Let's just clear it and go back to the 15. There we go. So now you can go through here. So there's a 13. That's probably cases in the last 14 days. 46 is antibody tests in that county. 3091 is the diagnostic tests in that county. And you get the idea. So one of my scripts actually iterates all the counties in the database that I've got and then makes a call to these queries, kind of brute force one by one, and gets the values. And then I've got a bunch of calculations that happen to that data after that too, where I compute the 7-day averages, I compute percent growth, and I compute doubling time in days using a logarithmic function as well. So kind of on the back end, it does get complicated, even as much as I try to say it's simple. The nature of the way they present this data was challenging. But it's in pretty good shape now. Like I said, I think I can tell if something breaks pretty fast, and I'm able to pivot if they change their mind, which they do a lot. So when this board started, you only had cases and tests and deaths, and that's pretty much it. They had a map, and then they've added over time the 14-day counts. They've added the hospitalizations. They've added recoveries and probable counts, and they've added a number of other charts too. And another thing that they also do, which is challenging to track, is they release some of their information only in a PDF format. It's not a digital format that I can consume anywhere. So I actually had a guy get in touch with me, and he said, "Hey, I've been tracking these changes out of this PDF file since the very beginning. Do you want the data? I'll send you the Excel file." And he did. And so I was able to sort of backfill my database with the data from those PDF files too, to come up with some interesting charts that, let me see if I've got, let me show you one. One of them is their cases by age group. So this data from about August back, I didn't have, and it was just a PDF format, and we were able to pull it out and put it into a database to plot this out. And then they decided on August 13th to break the, the 5 to 24 category into the 5 to 17 and the 18 to 24. So I had to pivot and kind of redo the charts, and it complicated everything again. So that's kind of the world that I live in with Bama trackers. I'm having to adjust whenever they adjust, and they don't necessarily give me a heads up. They're actually really communicative with me though. I've been able to email them, and they've told me a few things, and I've told them a couple times when something wasn't right or was broken too, and they were able to fix it.
So you do have sort of a collaborative dialogue back and forth with them.
Very lightly, yes, yeah. The lady who I contact is very friendly. She's been very helpful, and I try not to ask too much of them because I know this is a big job for them too. But if something is really broken, I do try to point it out, and they fix it relatively quickly usually. But I don't really have any kind of premonition to when they're going to change what they're doing, and that's okay. As soon as they change, then I'll just put a site, a banner up on my site and say, "Give me a day and I'll fix it." And that may be happening again soon. Who knows? It's one of those things. Like next week, they could change their mind and the board could be totally different.
So speaking of data collaboration, do you ever have dialogues with other individuals who run other COVID dashboards in the area, in the region?
Yeah, I have. So I have worked with a couple, and I've got them linked in here at the bottom. So let me see, which one do I want to talk about first? So Samford has their own dashboard. And the guy who's been working on this early on got in touch with me and asked me some questions, and I asked him some questions because I think they've done a really fantastic job on their board. And he's got a lot of data in here too. And one thing he ended up doing was on one of the screens, go a little further in, he's got, this is a great one where he's pulling in this one with all the counties. A little further. So he's actually got Bama Tracker as one of his tabs, which I thought was really nice of him to do. And it looks pretty nice, kind of mixed in with the Samford board. But so I worked with this guy, and that went well. And then I've also worked with the original creator of the Alabama Political Reporter Dashboard. They Chip Brownlee right here. He and I have gone back and forth and collaborated a few times. They're tracking some cool data too. They have a few things that I'm not doing. They have some stuff down here, some prison-related case data, which is very interesting stuff that I'm not currently doing as well. And then I've had a few others get in touch with me in other states, Tennessee and Georgia in particular. And I've had a couple national sites just briefly look at Bama Tractor and give me some suggestions as well too. So, but those would probably be the main ones.
So what do you see well, I guess A, do you have a roadmap? And B, how do you sort of see Bama Tracker evolving? Are there like sort of cool little things that you have in the wings that you sort of want to see the site move into?
Yeah, so that's a good question. One thing I did that could be a lot better is I started tracking the individual schools. They have their own dashboards, like including Alabama. And so I've got this section on the site, it's called school data, and I've got links to all the different boards around the state, so we can look at Bama's. And theirs is changing every week, and I think it's improving a lot too. I like what they're doing. I'm actually tracking all this data per week as well. So I've got these numbers and some other parts of this dashboard in my database. And one thing I thought about doing would be to do my own charts against the data, and I could do it per school. And these are the schools I've currently got data for. And you can see right now, I'm up to roughly last week on data. But the number one problem I'm facing is that every single one of these dashboards is different. And so there's not a very easy way programmatically to collect the data the same between them all. So if we look at like Alabama, and if we go look at USA, I mean, theirs is going to look completely different. I could screen scrape these, and I actually screen scraped a couple of them, but the biggest problem with that is as soon as they change their markup, your screen scraping is going to fail or going to grab the wrong thing. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to consume data from a dozen different sources with a dozen different formats. And I haven't come up with the right answer there. Potentially through a volunteer system, it might work, where I could have a designated person at each school who could say, I'll keep an eye on the board and I'll go and plug it into your site once a week. That may work. And on Reddit, if you ask people about volunteer for that kind of thing, there's always someone willing to volunteer to do that. So that may be an option too. I also would like to get better data for hospitalizations. So if I go, I've got these three charts, which are hospital related data. This is all statewide, and the health department updates the statewide counts fairly sporadically. Like it's kind of supposed to be Monday through Friday, but you can see these little jumps every other day or so is when they really change it. And then they are tracking the confirmed who's actually in the hospital right now at a state level, but I would love to get the data at a county level here. You've got Huntsville Hospital and UAB and Tuscaloosa's DCH. They put the numbers out from like on their own websites, but it's usually in an image or something like that too. So that's hard to consume programmatically as well. So that's another option, is I'd like to look at getting that data. But yeah, long term, it does depend a lot on what we see happen with COVID in our state. Right now, hospitalizations have dropped quite a bit. You can see on this chart, we were peaking around 1,600 people in the hospital, and we're down to half that. The fall is a big unknown. And I think a lot of people in the state are actually, they're either kind of done with COVID themselves, or they think it's done, or I'm not sure. So kind of the next month and beyond is really going to be interesting. And I think that'll kind of depend. I mean, that kind of directs the future of the site too. I've actually seen my traffic on the site go down month to month since May. So, May was the peak. I think that was probably the peak of when people were looking at the data and were kind of concerned with it. And then since we're seeing things improve, I think the site is seeing people not come to it as much. So, that's a good thing. And that's one of the reasons where I have to consider if I'm going to pivot and do something different in the next year. But right now, this is still what it's doing.
So speaking of the responding to the ebb and flow of events, are there any specific technical challenges, data logistics hurdles that you've cracked over the course of running this resource?
So the biggest challenge for sure would be if the let me go to stop sharing. The biggest challenge would be when the health department changes their data. I get a lot of questions directly to me or to the site that say, why is this now this? And I do my best to try to explain it all. The other challenge, I guess from the technical side, when I kind of went into that, was the change in their queries. Since it's not really designed for someone to consume it like I'm doing, I have to really keep an eye on all those things too. And, I think there's still the public perception challenge too, where I think people in a way are getting tired of the data and tired of the news kind of shoving it in their face every day. And so it's a challenging thing because I actually take some of the blunt of people's mistrust in the data, or they deny it or whatever. And that was always a goal of the site, was just to show the information. And I'm not trying to be political with it. I'm not trying to be, I don't have any kind of agenda. I just found that the data was interesting and possibly useful. So that's been a challenge too, to deal with essentially the trolls of the world out there who, I've had some nasty emails sent to me, just very, very rude people who, say that I'm contributing to the lies of the world and stuff like that. But so that's a challenge, right? And the social side of it too. But I've learned how to ignore people. That's pretty much what it takes. You just shake your head and you delete the email and you just keep on moving on, because at least there's some people who do find it useful and some professionals who want the data to keep studying it and things like that. And so that's the biggest motivator right there, is just to make sure that it's doing what I envisioned it to do, and who cares about the haters out there, pretty much.
Truer words have never been spoken. Speaking of sort of the human element and the in real life element, you said at the beginning of the conversation that this isn't your day job. And so how do you sort of balance doing Bama Tracker and then the day job, and then I'm sure you have a family? How do you sort of handle that work-life balance?
I definitely try very hard to maintain the balance. Typically, if I'm going to work on something, it'll be early in the morning. So there's times where I'll get up before the rest of my house is awake and, do some extra work. There are times in the evening where I'll do some things. But I try really hard to put it down, after 4 or 5, all my work, not just Bama Tracker, but my actual day job too. Just because, there's extracurricular stuff to do and I don't want to miss any of that. So, of course, there have been times where I've had to get on and fix something, especially when data breaks or the site isn't doing what it's supposed to do. But generally, if I can automate it, I will, and that's helped a lot. So I've got a number of things that just run every hour, and I can come on and check it as I need to. But I'm trying to reduce the amount of manual effort here, because I can't spend day and night doing that. And I've kind of always been this way though too. So my family is used to me having sort of a side website or something going, and that helps. So it isn't just like a brand new thing, where all of a sudden I'm off doing that. But I think over the years I've gotten better at learning to keep that balance for their sake too. So, but it can be difficult. That's why I said if you get up early, no one really cares if you're up at 7 in the morning writing code on something. And then I'm very blessed too, because my company, I've been with them a long time, and we're able to work very flexible hours. So, you know, like I'm able to do this presentation right now, and it's not a big deal because they know that, you know, I'm still going to get my work done, and I'll, if I have to work a little bit later tonight to handle it, not a big deal. So really grateful for that. And I'm really grateful for the field that we're in, because we're able to work remote, and, you know, our jobs didn't suffer. And so that's truly a blessing that I want to be thankful for too, is just to be able to keep doing what I'm doing, even amidst this pandemic like we've had. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, you just have to be careful to not spend every hour of every day, you know, wrapped up in this kind of stuff. Just stop and take a break. And there are times where I have to stop completely for 2 or 3 days, and, you know, don't look at my phone, don't do anything, just kind of unwind, because it can add to stress that I don't need to add. And I'm sure you guys run into that all the time.
It's one of the reasons I was curious to get your take, because I think that those of us who work in the web, it becomes very easy to sort of burn the candle at both ends, because there's always the next challenge, and there's always the project that you just, you know, you want to push through. And the internet doesn't have closing hours. There's always stuff coming across. And so it's always really interesting to see how people who have web, just general technology as a profession, how they sort of handle that balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if the server was to drop or something was to break, and I'm going to hear about it pretty quick, just through an email or something. Yeah, you have to be prepared to handle those kind of things for sure.
So we've sort of gotten through most of our pre-prepared dialogue elements here. And so I'm delighted to be able to have a little bit of time here to turn the floor over to any members of the WebTide community who might have some additional questions for David. And so I'll be silent for a few moments, and anyone who has any questions, feel free to chime in. And feel free to be as technical as you may like.
And I can go into more specifics too, if anyone cares to, on some of the server side code or the charting code too. I didn't even really show any of that. If you want to see that, I'm happy to do it.
Hey, David, this is Kyle Fondren, Director of Web Strategy at UA. We're coming up on a project with our capital campaign that's going to be pretty chart heavy. And as I've been sitting here, I've been looking through Apex charts, but could you show us some of the backside of that stuff and how you use it on Bama Tracker?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. All right, so let me get my screen shared and do it right this time. Okay, let me know if you can see everything right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me show you. Go to the right page. I don't have a real simple chart, but I kind of do. Let me just pick one. So you've got like this chart, for example, cumulative cases. So that one is going to be the first chart. So it's real simple. You just have a div that sort of represents the charting area. And then this is my live code. I've got a different computer that has a local LAMP server and a Git repo that I use to actually develop it. But for the sake of this, it's easier just to show the live code because I'm on a different machine. What I've got is I've got a JavaScript file that's actually set as a PHP file, so it's a server side. It's going to process, and I'm not using like an ORM for this. I love them. I use Entity Framework all the time and things like that. But the data was so simple here that I was fine to just use straight SQL queries. But really, however you want to get the data out, it doesn't really matter. So what I've got is, so this is actually the JavaScript that generates that first chart that you saw. And I've got a data series called Cumulative Cases. And I'm just getting the the cases out of my data table, and I'm formatting them into a month, day, year format, which is what Apex likes. And what happens is the front page will actually pass a county that represents all of them, called total, and then each county page will actually pass its county in. So the same exact file is used across the whole site, and it just depends on what you're looking at. So that way I didn't have to make 2 copies of all the charts. So let me go to one of these so you can see what I'm talking about. I like using Tuscaloosa. You guys know that one. So the same chart here, cumulative, is the same chart up here. It's just filtered to the county. But the JavaScript was only written once, and so I don't have to worry about managing two of those. And then I've got a second data set, and the reason I've got this stupid if true, if one right here is because originally I was not showing the probable on either the county or either the state level, and then I ended up coming back and pulling that out, and so got a little bit of a lazy if here I need to clean up, but I didn't. And so you can have these data sets, and you can actually put a different type field in here too. So if you wanted one data set to be a line, one to be a column, you can do that. And then the rest of it's just settings that Apex documents pretty well. So I can say, do I want animations, which I personally hate animations on the chart, because every time you go to that chart, which some people do every day, multiple times per day, if you have to wait for the animation, I mean, that's just wasted time. And so I hate them. That's why I always turn them off. And then you can turn on different toolbars, and you can set up your colors. So per data set, you just have like this array of different colors. And the rest of it's pretty straightforward. Instead of having a real jarring line, I've got a curved line. Or maybe that's the opposite. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty curvy, so it kind of has a smooth look to it. And I'd say that Apex charts, people did a really good job on their documentation. And then at the end, once you're done with all your properties, you just tell it to render. And I've just got a different set of properties per chart with a different set of data sets. And so they all run out of this Apex file. And then the state page and the county pages just use the same file. And there's a few places where I'm checking if, if it's a specific county. I've got some annotations that are only on specific counties. I think Tuscaloosa may have one of those. Yeah, right here. So I've got an annotations object in the JavaScript file that will only appear if it's Tuscaloosa. That kind of stuff. Let me see if I can find a more advanced one. That's this one's pretty advanced because it's got 2 lines and a bar. This one's got 4 data sets, 3 of which are lines and 1 bar. However, there's one limitation that I wish Apex didn't have. So far, I have not been able to do a stacked column plus line. I think they may want you to buy up to like, they try to sell you to, I think, high charts or a different package, but Apex is like their free one. And you can't get the stacked with a line with them. Does that answer your question? I can go into some other examples if you want, but it's pretty straightforward when it comes to just the options and then your series and then your render. And that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, cool. You're welcome. Let me show you one thing I've got, which no one's ever seen this, but there's a lot of files in here because I've got a lot of different data things happening. But the main data file runs out of this, and it runs on a cron job. But you can get an idea of the amount of different calls that I have to make to get, I'm getting probable cases, I'm getting probable deaths, I'm getting antibody counts, I'm getting 14-day counts, and then I've got hospitalizations, and then you can see I've actually commented some stuff out when they've changed on me. A lot of times I'll get rid of them. In my next commit or 2, I should probably do a cleanup because I don't like leaving a bunch of commented code, but I have some here. And then I've got, let's see, even more. Down here, a little ways, I've got, here we go. I've got my 7-day counts that run. So after I'm done getting all the new data, then I look through each county and I'm actually computing different 7-day counts using, fairly complicated subqueries with MySQL to do that, and then updating them. And then I have some speed related things that run at the bottom here to keep the site fast. So this kind of thing runs every hour to keep the data up to date. It's just pretty much just JSON I'm working with, which PHP is really good with JSON. That's another reason I like using it. What else can I show or answer?
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. You may have touched on this. I had to come in a little late. I had a meeting run long, but how often are they changing their data, their queries and stuff? How often are you finding yourself dealing with that? I know you said you were checking on pretty much every other day or whatever, but how often are you actually seeing change?
I would say they really and truly are not changing more than maybe twice a month.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad. There's been times where they've changed. Okay, so let me describe it this way. They change their board maybe twice a month, maybe a little bit less, but sometimes they change their data sets that drive the numbers on their board more often. So in the example, the best one I've got is like this test one here. We got 1 million tests. That one might be a different data set than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So what I'll find is if on my side, if the number no longer updates, then I know that, oh, they're using a different service now. Like I'll go on and I'll see, how come Bama Tracker's showing 20,000 less than they're showing? And so that's the kind of thing. And if you multiply that times each number of each different data point they're showing, then that's where it can be a little bit more cumbersome and I have to check it more often. But when it comes to the actual design of their board and what the data they're showing, it's not as often as their data sets behind the scenes as they change. It's enough to be where I have to think about it at least once a week.
So does that require manual intervention on your part to sort of monitor and keep track, or do you have scripts that will just email you saying, hey, there's a discrepancy here, let's look into it? So
it's not emailing me. Right now I've got my little back-end dashboard, and if the number turns red and it doesn't change from red to green in a reasonable amount of time, then I can tell pretty much that I've got something broken. It would be nice if it emailed me, so maybe I'll add that. And then and I'll tell you too, they like to change some of their data in the middle of the night. I'll go to sleep and then I'll wake up and have found that maybe all the 14-day counts didn't load after midnight or something. And that's happened 3 or 4 times where I'll wake up and Bama Tracker will just be completely broken. And I've put a lot of handling in now to keep that from happening. But it used to be early on because I would expect something and then it wouldn't appear in the middle of the night. So the whole site would just, collapse is the wrong word, but it didn't know how to handle it. But it's a lot better now, like I said.
Speaking of that work-life balance, wouldn't that be wonderful if you could get that email at 3 a.m. when you...
Yeah. Well, that's why you turn your notifications off.
Right.
And don't even check your email till 8. But if something breaks, in the middle of the night, I'll get people emailing pretty quick about it too. The traffic is weird. This is actually analytics from Google right now. I don't know how that looks on your screen or not, but so there's about 100 people concurrent on the site, a lot of mobile users, and what I find is between 8 in the morning and 10, it'll jump to 500 to 750 or so active, because that's when people know that the data is about to update. So the first chunk of data updates at 10, and then different things change later in the day, like hospitalization counts change after lunch. Sometimes the 14-day counts don't change until closer to noon. So if the site's broken during that morning window, or something doesn't change, then there's enough people on there that start emailing me that, yeah, I know pretty quick. And the other day it actually happened. I don't even know how it happened, but I actually had a completely broken JavaScript file, and it was causing the whole front page to be just not load. And I had a guy email me and said, man, your site's been doing this to me for like 3 days. And I couldn't believe it because I had checked it myself in that period of time. But what happened was he actually had the wrong file that was broken. It was cached on his end. So I had to go through and make sure that I'm keeping caches and stuff from happening like that, because I'm not sure how many people that actually affected. But
so speaking of feedback, what is the best way for people to sort of interact with you through social media and other items?
Oh yeah, okay. So if you go to the site, generally it's a little buried now, but down at the bottom, there's actually a frequently asked questions page, and I've got, my name on here, and you can email me here. So my emails is on the site, and that's where a lot of people come through. But the Twitter account has grown quite a bit since it started in April. Roughly, we're getting close to 10,000 followers on the account now. And so a lot of people will send messages via the Bama Tracker Twitter. And a lot of media, a lot of reporters and stuff use that to kind of get in touch with me. And there's been some really helpful people. A lot of reporters that have way better connections to the health department than I do. And they'll ask me, or they'll tell me, hey, I heard that this is about to happen, or I found out why the data didn't update, and that kind of thing. So I'm really grateful to have that communication here through Twitter with these people out there. And there's been a lot of people in the state that I've ended up working with and talking to and doing interviews with, and they've all just been extremely professional and really easy to work with too. And it's helped me countless ways for them to be in touch with me like that. So yeah, Twitter and email are the main two if you want to get in touch.
And speaking of support, I wanted to give you a moment here. I know that this is a public service that you're doing for the state, and we all thank you for your time. But is there, I'll set you up for a shameless plug here. Is there a more tangible way people can express their appreciation?
Well, I appreciate the chance to show it. Yeah, you're right. The site is free. I'm not getting paid to build it. And there's a link over here on the side. And if you're watching my screen, you can see it. So on this, there's a couple options that a lot of people have done, and I really appreciate the support. But so the easiest way is people can just buy me a coffee, and all that is just it shoots me a couple bucks through PayPal. And then I recently started the Bama Tracker Patreon, and I've had more professional types start to support the site on a monthly basis through that too. And so that's been good, because it's it's enough to start paying for all my costs that I have. And if you can't support like that too, a lot of people just like to share the site. It's been shared on Facebook 16,000 times since it was started, and on Twitter I think maybe 5,000 or 6,000 times. There's with what they are, but I mostly just watch the Facebook shares. But yeah, the support Bama Tracker page is here on the site if anybody's interested in doing that. But of course, it's not expected, and it doesn't change the fact that I'm working on the site, regardless if you do it or not. But I do appreciate the little the copies and stuff that come through from that.
Well, David, we're reaching the end of our hour here, but just wanted to say thank you once again for coming to chat with our campus community, web community, to give a little bit of a spotlight on how Bama Tracker works and what it's like to build this resource. Do you have any passing last minute thoughts you want to share?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I really appreciate you guys inviting me to do this. I love what you're doing with this community you've built, and I think that's really cool. And I'm a big Bama fan. I've always been a Bama fan my whole life. So I'm very honored to be invited to this. And last thing I can say is roll tide, because I'm looking forward to the season starting, and I'm hoping that everyone keeps their health and we get back to normal. You know what I mean? So just thank you.
Well, thank you. And I don't think that there is a more fitting way to wrap up any meeting on the University of Alabama campus than a roll tide. So
Right.
it's been a pleasure to have you, and to the rest of the WebTide community, thank you for your participation, and look forward to seeing y'all again in the next WebTide meetup. Hope y'all stay safe and have a great remainder of your week, and stay productive.